It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Property Podcast. It's episode 43. I'm Rob Bence, and joining me every week is Rob Dix. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
Good morning, Rob. Really well, thank you. How about you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Very good. Easing my way into the new year, feeling very positive still, lots of momentum, and rightly so, because it's a big day.
It really is, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll come to that.
I'm just so excited.
I know, me too. Coming up, we'll be telling you why it's such a big day. We're also going to be talking interest rates. Are rates going to go up? Should you be worried about it? What should you do about it? We're going to tell you. And of course, there is a resource of the week. But before we can get into all that, you've got to do some iTunes reviews, Rob.
Of course I have. They are coming in by the boatload still. Thank you so much to everyone who's taken time over Christmas and New Year to leave us a review. We really appreciate it, and we will get through them all. But this week, our thanks goes to David Grant. And David says, I'm currently on episode 25 and I've found the podcast fascinating. It's an efficient way to learn. I've taken your advice and listened to audiobooks of both Rich Dad Poor Dad and How to Make Friends and Influence People. You've clearly understood the principles of Carnegie's book, as you both show sincere appreciation to people with no hollow flattery, which is refreshing in this industry. I found my dad also reading Rich Dad Poor Dad after he heard about the book at a property meet. He's a successful property developer, surveyor, master builder, and has been in the game for 40 years. And has been buying a property a month lately. 6 in Leeds, more recently. At 24 and not long out of uni, I know I've still a lot to learn, but your podcast helped me to better equip myself when debating with my dad or chatting at property meets. I'll be straight on to Property News Radio and Property Geek when I'm up to date. Thanks for putting all this out there, Dave. Well, thanks, Dave. We really appreciate that. It's a lovely review. Our next review is from Paul, and it says, very useful resource. He says he's been investing for 15 years and buying stuff that looks good. Lots of information to go through, and it's easy on the ear. Thank you, Paul. Very concise, but really appreciate it. So, Rob, as I've mentioned, I'm pretty excited today because it's a big, big day for us both.
It is a big day. If you've not worked out why yet, it's because the Property Hub opens today.
Woohoo!
But it has been months in the making. It feels like years in the making, but it's up. We've been working through Christmas trying to get it all sorted. We've had our brave team of Property Hub Plus members in there already testing it out and working out some of the kinks for us. And now the doors are open for you. So all you have to do is go over to thepropertyhub.net. When you're there, there's lots for you to check out. You can go over to the forum and sign up for a free account. When you do that, have a look around and go say hello on the introductions thread. We absolutely love when we read out the reviews like that and people tell us a bit about themselves. Now you've got a forum to do it as well and be greeted by lots of other people. So please go and do that. Check everything out. There are courses in there as well. We've got a couple of courses in there for you already. We're going to be adding more all the time. There's just a ton of stuff to check out. So clear a little gap in your schedule and get over to thepropertyhub.net.
Yeah, make sure on your lunchtime today or when you get back home, take 15, 20 minutes out, have a look around, have a nosy, and make sure, as Rob said, you introduce yourself. Say hello. Rob and I will be pretty much stuck to the forum all day today, so we'll say hi back if you venture in. We'd love to chat to you online as well, not just this one-way communication that we have at the moment, and that's the whole reason why we built the hub. So we can have these conversations out in the public that we are doing privately at the moment, via email or phone call, and it's a way that everybody can learn from each other. So we're super, super excited, as you may have guessed over the last few weeks.
Yeah, exactly. It's really good that this day has finally arrived. And probably even more excitingly, on Saturday, so if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, in just a couple of days' time, we've got the Property Hub launch party in London, so we're going to be meeting a lot of you in person as well, which is going to be great. The number of tickets we've sold for that is incredible. We just put it on sale and sent out one email, and it's gone absolutely nuts. So it looks like it's going to be an even bigger affair than the last one we did, and I'm just really excited about it.
The venue from the last one, if you went to our first one, has slightly changed, still in King's Cross. It's actually within the station, so really, really easy to get to. Not Harry Potter's platform, you'll be pleased to hear, but it's actually the Parcel Yard, which is a pub just upstairs inside the station. Very easy to find. And once you're in the Parcel Yard, just look out for the Property Podcast signs, the Property Hub signs, and you'll know you're in the right place.
Yeah, so one heck of a week coming up. Hope we get to meet you either online or in person. But we should move on. We should give you a bit of a podcast, shouldn't we? So this week we're going to be talking about interest rates. Because the cost of borrowing is one of our biggest expenses as investors. And it's something that we don't have a lot of control over. And because of that, I think it generates a lot of worry. And I've had a lot of emails about it recently, sort of saying, oh, what do you think is going to happen? What should I be doing? People are talking about it a lot because it appears that there's some kind of recovery going on. And that means that some people are talking about the base rate going up before the end of the year. Rob, how worried should we be about interest rates?
Well, we should acknowledge them. Okay. But I wouldn't be overly worried because interest rates, yes, they are going to go up. They can only go up, but I'm not particularly worried. And here's why. First of all, we need to look at who's in charge, who's running the show. Now, in the past, politicians have controlled interest rates. So our podcast listeners who are old enough to remember may think back to the 80s when we had very, very high interest rates. Okay, so lending was very high subsequently. The reason why is because politicians were in charge of these rates. And quite frankly, they didn't know what they were doing. Now, you can't blame it just because they're politicians. The science of economics has really moved on, and it is a science. As you may be aware, today, interest rates are controlled by the Bank of England. The Bank of England will move the base rates as and when needed. If the economy is strengthening and they need to slow things down, they may raise the interest rates. Now, politicians in the past, in the 80s, they moved interest rates 3 times in under a week. Why is that so crazy? Well, now it's commonly accepted that when you change an interest rate, when the base rate moves, to have an effect on the economy, it's about a 6-month window, 6 to 9 month window. So it's like turning a barge around. So when you change the interest rate, it's not like flicking a switch and suddenly the economy changes. For the full impact to occur, it takes somewhere between 6 to 9 months. So changing it 3 times in a week now looks very silly, but back then they thought it was the best thing to do. Fortunately, we have some supposedly very clever people and very well-paid people, I might add, looking after the base rates and the movements of them. And Mark Carney, in particular, who heads up the Bank of England, is very, very well regarded, in the world of economics. He did a great job in Canada. So hopefully we're in safe hands. So that's the first thing, is who's in charge. The second thing is people go, well, if the rates rise, then so will my mortgage. Well, yes, if you're on a tracker, that's technically true. But new products I'm not so worried about. So I don't think if the interest rates go up, that the rates that we'll be getting new mortgages at will go up either. And let me explain why. Before the 07-08 crash, buy-to-let mortgages were around about 5.5% to 6%. And the Bank of England rate was nearly as high as that. So the bank margins that they were making on every single mortgage were very, very small. Very small, point something of a percent. They weren't making a lot of money. Today, post-crash, where we are today, the Bank of England rate is 0.5, but the mortgage rates are at 4%. So you can see there's a much, much bigger margin. The banks are borrowing are a lot less than they're lending to us. So they're making huge amounts of margin. And they've been doing this since the crash. They've been making huge margins off property investors. Where we are today to 12 months ago, mortgage rates on average have come down. So I would have said, on average, at a 75% loan to value, you would have been a year ago at about 5%. Today, it's roughly around about 4%, what most people are getting. The Bank of England rate hasn't changed. Why is the mortgage rates come down? Why are we getting better products today than we were a year ago? And the simple reason is it's competition. More and more lenders are coming into the market, and they're increasing the competition, so their margins are coming down as they're trying to win more and more business. And this is what I believe will happen if they start to raise interest rates. They won't just start bringing out products that are a lot more expensive. They'll actually swallow up some of that cost in competition, because if the interest rates go up, it means that the economy is strengthening. Therefore, there's more people coming into the market, more people trying to borrow money. That'll then encourage even more lenders to bring more products out, and that increased competition will bring rates down. So I've kind of given you a big point there and gone through a few points to get there. But I think it's important to understand, because if you understand that, I think you'll be a lot less worried about interest rates going up.
So let's just stop the podcast there then. Forget interest rates. It's all fine. I think that's all undoubtedly true. But at the same time, I was never a Boy Scout, but I do know that it never hurts to be prepared. over time, over whatever period of time we're talking about, the base rate can only really go in one direction. So it pays to be prepared. In other words, conditions at the moment are pretty good for investors. You can borrow pretty cheaply and rents are pretty good. And that means that it's a good time to review your portfolio and plan for the future, strengthen your position so you can cope with whatever the future holds. If you are worried about borrowing eventually getting more expensive, what can you do about it? We've come up with a few different things that you can be doing now to prepare for the future.
Okay, so the first is build up cash in the bank. So if your mortgages are cheap, you should be making a good profit on, which you can save up to do one of the following. Pay down your debt to reduce your loan to value. So if you had a £100,000 property, an £80,000 mortgage, and you're making a surplus every month, you could, if you wanted to, pay down that mortgage. And let's say you eventually paid off 5,000, property prices haven't gone up or down, then you're at 75% mortgage. So that now your LTV is 75%. Not a strategy I'm a fan of, but if you are particularly worried about interest rates, then maybe it's a strategy you could adapt. You could instead, something that I think is a bit more preferable, is have a contingency fund in place in case interest rates suddenly spike. So taking that money and putting it aside and building up your surplus in a pot, building it up steadily. The reason why I like that is it leads nicely into point 3. If you continue to do that, the third option could be you put yourself in a position to swoop and buy more property if less prepared people start going bust if interest rates rise. So that money that was a contingency fund, if you keep building it, it can then become an investment fund. So I like a combination of the second and the third. Take that money and by reinvesting it, you should actually get a better return than you would do paying off your debt down. For example, if your interest rate is 4% and you're paying that down, but you can invest that money to give a 6% return, you're far better investing your money to get that 6% return as long as your cash flow is protected. Remember, cash flow is king. It's something we've said a lot, but maybe need to say more of. Cash flow is the foundation of property investment. If you have great cash flow, then your portfolio is safe. If you have poor cash flow, then your portfolio is in jeopardy. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing related to that, another thing you can be doing right now is to stress test your portfolio. In other words, you want to make sure that that cash flow is still going to be there at higher rates of borrowing. So if at the moment you've got a buy-to-let mortgage at sort of the typical 4 to 5%, or maybe you're even lucky enough to be on a tracker that's gone down to practically nothing, that's all well and good now, but you want to make sure that if the costs do go up, you're going to be okay at higher rates of borrowing. So there are two ways that you can be assessing the health of your portfolio with regards to that. So the first thing you can do is pick an arbitrary interest rate to check against. So you might say that you want to check whether you're still making a monthly profit at a borrowing rate of 8%. And you might choose 8% because you go, okay, well, the base rate might go up to 5, which is around the historical average. And the lenders might want to make a 3% margin on top of that. So if the numbers stack up at 8%, I'll be happy. Another way of looking at it is to calculate your break-even interest rate. In other words, at what rate of borrowing do you no longer make a profit, but not lose money either? So that might be higher or lower than the 8% that we picked a minute ago. If you don't like the numbers that come out, you might want to take action. The action could be paying down some debt, building up cash reserves, adding value to your property, finding ways of making more money from your property, and more things we'll come to later. Rather than burying your head in the sand, sort of taking a look at what could happen in the future and sort of how your portfolio will stack up could be a useful exercise to be doing now while things are good.
Okay, so the next option is sell a property.
What?
Oh, God, it hurt me to say it. But there are exceptions to the rule. So Rob and I always say never sell a property. But there are exceptions because if you've got a property that's barely making you any money at the rates as they are now, and you can't think of a way of making the numbers add up, not being able to add to that cash flow, increase rent, what have you, then there's no law, although there maybe should be, but there's no law that says you can't sell a property. This is a fair point. If you've got a property that's barely making any money, or is even possibly losing your money, which I find hard to see in this market, but some people may have that type of property in their portfolio, then it's not an asset. Something that costs you money or doesn't make you money is not an asset. So you need to address that to find a way to make sure it does bring you money. But if you can't, then really you've got a liability on your hands and you may be better off selling that property. If you can get any cash out of it and reinvest it, fantastic. But if you're worried about the rates going up and it makes you nervous, then you might just want to sell it full stop. With the Help to Buy scheme bringing a lot of owner-occupiers back to the market, it might not be a bad time to sell and use the proceeds to buy something that will perform better if you do get some cash out at the end. It's against our traditional advice, but there are exceptions to every rule. And as I've just gone through, there might be times when you should consider selling a property.
Okay. Point number 4, another thing you can do, add value to reduce your loan to value. If you're doing what we said earlier and you're banking cash, building up that stockpile while times are good, you can take some of that and use it to add value to your properties. So it isn't always going to be worthwhile, but there are some situations where it might be. So say there's a property where you could add an extension or do a major refurb to raise the market value. And by doing so, you'd bring your loan to value down from, say, 81% to 69%. Then that might put you in a position to get access to better rates if interest rates do start going up and you want to remortgage. That's because it makes it less risky in their eyes. You've kind of taken it from the band of sort of 80% loan to value down to a sort of a more preferential band of rates that you sometimes get below 70% loan to value. It's something you've got to be a bit careful with. There are lots of situations where it's not going to work. Even if you do it, there's no guarantee that the lender is going to agree that you've added as much value as you think you have. But it's something to keep in mind. But it's just another way of making the point that if you're building up cash now rather than just spending it on holidays or whatever, it gives you multiple things you can do. You can either make improvements to reduce your loan to value. You can directly pay down your mortgages, which you've already said is maybe not the optimal thing to do, but you can. Or you can just keep that cash in the bank to kind of make yourself feel more comfortable that you've got some leeway, or maybe even the case that other people start to struggle and you're in a position to buy property at a really good price. Okay, so that's the 4th thing you can do. Add value to reduce your loan to value.
5th and last on our list is find ways to increase profit you make from the property. We've touched on this earlier in the episode, but how can you look at increasing your monthly income to compensate for higher monthly costs? So the first thing you can do, really simple, is check your rent is in line with the local area. If you're charging $500 a month and you do a bit of research on Rightmove, call a couple of agents and see that the average rent in the area is closer to $550, then you might want to consider moving it up. But be careful. Don't get greedy. So if the rent in your area is $500, you're achieving $500, don't try and squeeze $525 because you think the tenant will be reluctant to move out. 1, it's not that really fair, but 2, you risk losing a tenant. And if you've got a good tenant, sometimes, that short-sighted view ends up being more expensive. Because if you try and get an extra £20, £25 out of a tenant and they leave, and it takes you 2 months to get the property let again, well, that's 2 months of income at £500 to £1,000 you've lost. So that's going to take you a long, long time to recoup that. So be careful. Don't just start throwing your rents up on properties if you can't justify it. But make sure you're always on top of what your local market's doing. Your letting agent, if they're any good, should be advising you on pretty much an annual basis anyway to let you know where the rents are at. Next, check you're getting the best possible deal on your insurance and other costs. Running a property, you've got your mortgage cost. You may have a letting agent, so you've got your letting agent's fees, which hopefully you've negotiated on at the beginning. But you have other costs as well, things like insurances. Have a look at the relevant insurance policies that you have. See if you can bring those down. If you have any other costs on your portfolio, have a look at those as well. If you, for example, have a maintenance insurance, which some people do, have you got the best and the most competitive deal out there? And maybe, you can save an extra £10, £20 a month, which may make all the difference. Another thing you can do is consider turning your property into a HMO, a house of multiple occupancy. So for people who are unfamiliar with HMOs, it's taking a property and renting out room by room. Now, it may sound good initially because you can increase your income. And for some people, HMOs are a very effective strategy. But don't go into it lightheartedly. It is a completely different kettle of fish to, normal buy-to-lets. There are regulations often that you need to adhere to. There are dealing with multiple tenants. And probably your time you'll invest personally will increase as well. So you have to look at that trade-off for time for income as well. But if it's a situation that requires you to increase your income and you haven't got much choice about it, HMO could be that last roll of the dice that saves a property portfolio. You may want to do it anyway if you're keen on that type of strategy and you're prepared to put the systems and the time in place to realize that extra income. But as I said, very effective way of increasing your income, but just don't go into it lightheartedly. There's a lot to take on board.
So, in conclusion then, how worried should you be about interest rates? Not particularly, we think, but you definitely shouldn't be complacent either. There's plenty you can be doing if you want to. We've just given you 5 things that you can be doing right now to plan for the future of your portfolio and make sure that you're in the best possible position. Because remember, property is a business, and any business should always be looking at ways of cutting costs and generating more revenue. That's something that you should be doing constantly, always regularly checking if there are any ways that you could be running your portfolio more efficiently, making more income or cutting your costs. And you also just want to make sure that you're never in a position where you're forced to sell or you're backed into a corner. You want to be in a position where if things do start to turn and times for investors aren't as good as they are now, you're one of the people who's been prudent and has planned for it and can take advantage of the situation rather than being forced by your lender or by anyone else to sell or go onto a horrible rate or anything else. So hopefully, rather than being worried about interest rates, you're now thinking, okay, whatever happens, I can now be taking action to make sure that I'm in the best possible position.
I think if you're going to take one action point away from this podcast, it's not to panic, but it's to just do that assessment that Rob's talked about, do the break-even test. Because that won't take you a long time to do. You know, it's quick calculations. Okay, so my property's making this much now. If interest rates are at 8% or my mortgage repayments are at 8%, am I breaking even? If 8% you're breaking even or even still making a profit, I don't think you've got anything to worry about whatsoever. You probably can ignore the other points. But for your own peace of mind, if this has sort of jolted you a bit, oh, I've not thought of that, just do the stress test. And that alone will put your mind at ease or let you know that you might need to take some additional action. So that's another topic. I hope you've enjoyed it. But we've got a resource of the week, and this is definitely one from yourself, Mr. Dix, being the international superstar that you are.
I don't know about that, but yeah, this is one of mine, and I thought I'd put it in there because it's something that I've been using every day for the last few months. It's called Duolingo, and what it is, it's a really, really cool way of learning languages. And so I thought I'd put it in this week because start of the year, people are still thinking about their New Year's resolutions. Maybe you want to learn a language. And if you do, then I really, really recommend Duolingo because it doesn't feel like you're learning a language at all. It's more like a game. You can find it at duolingo.com, and we'll link it in the show notes, of course. It's also got a really, really good app for Android and iPhone. And so each lesson only takes about 5 minutes. So it means that if you've got it on your phone, if you're ever stuck in the dentist's waiting room or waiting for a bus or anything else, you can just whip out your phone and rather than playing Angry Birds, you can learn a little bit of a language. It makes the whole thing really fun. So I've been doing it for Spanish for about 3 months now. It's made a really, really big difference without really feeling like any work at all. Absolutely no property tie-in at all, unless you want to brush up your Spanish to go and invest in property there, but that's a bit of a tenuous link. Really, it's just something that you might find fun if languages are something that you want to get into.
Remember, think back to episode 41, where we talked about using habits to hit your goals, to hit your resolutions. So maybe you want to set a daily habit to use Duolingo at some point in a day, spend 10 minutes a day on it. And you can use another app that we've mentioned before, Lift, and that's lift.do, to encourage you to do that habit every day. So have a look at lift.do and Duolingo together and make it a new habit for 2014 if a language is something that's on your list.
Yeah, it's a whole incremental improvement thing. Just 5 minutes a day done every day really, really compounds, and you'll be surprised with how far you get. Okay, well, that's about it for this week. Next week, we're talking risk and reward. What risks are you taking in your property business? And how can you manage those? And how does the risk profile of different types of investment change? That's what we're going to be getting into next Thursday. But in the meantime, it's very obvious what we want you to do this week. Get into the hub and tell us what you think, thepropertyhub.net.
Please do. We've put so much time and effort into the hub, and we'd love it if you'd come and join us, say hello, and let us know what you think. And we're open to feedback. If there's areas that you think we can improve on, we'll do it. You know, this is a tool for everyone. So we're really, really proud of what we've put together so far, but we want to make it better for you. Come in, have a look around, contribute, say hello, and if you think there's things we can improve on, let us know. You know, as I said, this is a resource for all of us. Okay, well, that's us for another week. Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we've got a great episode lined up for you. For all the people coming to our event on Saturday, we can't wait to see you. That should be loads of fun. But until then, thanks very much. Have a great week, and we'll see some of you on Saturday.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.